we're talking about the infinite game, and because the last two episodes have been sort of 2 episodes ago, we set up the infinite game. And then last week we talked about the essence, the tipping point, the map, and the plan. Like, what are some of the ingredients of building an infinite game?
Right.
And you can't get to the plan too quickly, because if you don't know what the essence is or the tipping point of that essence, and you start mapping and planning stuff, what are you mapping and planning to? Like some lesser than what your soul really wants to do.
Right. And it just becomes, chasing some metric versus right. And then the tipping point, I mean, we were sort of aligned with 1 million, just as because you need something out there, right?
Yeah.
To say, and then it becomes, then it's a big enough game to be like, okay, well, not selling 6 more houses, and that was really a sort of metric around my brain is this about selling 6 more houses? Is this about, that, or is this about something larger and creating a community around you that is out fulfilling on something that you've said matters.
Right. And what started to show up for me as before we hit record today was you had said, like, in an infinite game, it never ends. And what I started to think of was your example of agency. The essence of your infinite game is agency. And what I saw was that right now, how you build a plan or a project around agency could look could be appropriate to this time, this day and age we're in. But in 20 years, it might look like maybe there's been some work that's been done here. And what happens is you start to go, how do we move the needle on agency earlier in life? And maybe there's some after school programs, big brother, big sister. There's some different ways you start to move agency younger in age instead of waiting for people to have a career. I mean, that's what I mean. Like, you could take it anywhere and it never ends.
Right. And so in temporality, it's never ends, and and then there's nobody, so it's infinite in both time and space. There's nobody who's outside of it. And I think that's a sort of an important aspect of, in essence, is it big enough to hold? Are there edges? No. Good. Okay, well, that's good.
Right.
And then then to chunk it down. I notice I just have an enormous amount of resistance to breaking it down like this. And this has sort of been, a revolving conversation we've had here before in terms of building the community and stuff is, okay, now that you've got the essence articulated and you've got the tipping point articulated, then you really, then it really is about beginning to map it. Like, okay, how am I going to get to 1 million agents? And then, at that point or 1 million people. And, then it becomes, okay, well, where is my access? And I'm now just thinking this out loud. Okay. This is what we talked about. But I think I just noticed I have resistance. I'm doing this work around, agent attraction, or even just anything that I do, right, where I have to put a pen to paper and put names on it and then start to call. Like just yesterday with my, it's the resistance to lead gen. It's the resistance to, am I going to take the actions? Am I going to, or am I just going to talk about it all day? So then then I look at the different domains in which I play. I've got agents that I train. I got the agents on my team. I got the agents that I'm going to attract. I've got the people for whom I lead programs for over here. I've got my family, children. Right. I've got my island community,
Vashon.
And then Vashon, where I live. And then it's, so there's, when you say map, it's funny because I immediately think of a road map, but when I'm speaking, it shows up like, wow, really? It's more like a mind map. Like, like there's, people experience agency in the middle, and then there's all these,
right. Yeah. That's good. I like that.
Spokes with, those little hubs on it, right? The hub is agency, and then you've got all these communities around there, and then in each one there's a game afoot, right? A game that gets created.
Yep.
Well, that's pretty
Perfect.
dope.
That's pretty sweet. Yeah.
That's pretty sweet. Then the whole thing now has a structure to it, right? In terms of the community that we're building and like that. So for people listening that, you know, for the two people that are listening besides us, you know, what is, so from essence to tipping point to, okay, I've pictured it like this, right? Like this, but that would infer in my world, like there's a point down here that's singular, and it's more like, all right, you've got the essence, and then the tipping point around that essence that you're saying is, you know, that's when that tipping point is met, this essence is fulfilled. And then around that, you then have spokes. So easier way for me to think of it. You know, and then at the end of each spoke is a community that that I'm engaged in, that you're engaged in, that you have a chance to play the infinite game of whatever you're playing. For me, agency, and you know,
you got it.
Well, that then nothing to resist there. That's
you got it. It's community is one container. It just makes a ton of sense to me. Like, I think if any change is going to be done, you said this last week, like behind any premise is the premise is for people, and then you can get specific about it. But community is the container of people, like, you know, where people gather, you could call a community. And when the community is connected through an idea, Seth Godin would call that a tribe, right? A group of people connected to an idea. Well, then you just have more momentum. I mean, you could have a community that's a community because they live in proximity to each other.
Yes.
And then you've got to do a little extra work to try to find common ground, to find connection. But when you start with the idea, and that's what you build the community around, connections much faster. And I just think that's how change happens. Change happens when we share the idea of change. When your idea of change matches my idea of change, there's quicker connection and more, the tangibility, the edges, the plan happens faster because we can mobilize around that idea.
Yeah, I'm just taking a note to myself because I just had a thought. I was just thinking about like our community and like that, and the
of agents,
and I was thinking about the nature of self-determination of agency, and one of the spheres, communities, is new agents. And I was thinking about it, or you know, there's a combination of, there's the magical mix of hand holding, you know, like I got your back, and ass kicking. That there's some mix there, and I think there's some marketing slogan there that communicates the, you know, the combination of, you know, a supportive, nurturing community that's got your back, that it's going to take you by the hand and move you through the spaces. And then there's the ass kicking, you know, you're going to get that done, because without you getting it done, it's not going to happen. So let's go. So I think there's some, you know, to get that chemistry just right. Of ass kicking, hand holding. I don't know. I mean, that to me is what Ram Dass's quote, walking each other home, means to me, you know, like, and I like, to me, there's less resistance. This is just for me. There's less resistance around the thought of walking each other home, where as we walk each other home, we're asking questions. We're also checking in on the work. What does that look like? Explain to me your project, explain to me the edges, like that there is a working out of it, versus the old school accountability approach, which feels to me like the gravitational pull of GCI in an industry that's like, you know, hit the number. And to me, the energy of that shuts me down, and versus the energy of a creation and art and expression opens me up, and walking each other home feels like an invitation to open up, you know? Yeah, I totally agree. It's funny. I started a blog post on this, on the intersection of possibility, listening, and accountability, like where those things intersect is where you really have the opportunity to create some sort of magic, and then there's, possibility is clearly what you're speaking to, right? That's the home, right? That you're walking people toward.
Yeah, right.
Right. So that's the possibility that people get to create. And then there's the listening of that possibility. So there's the opportunity that one has, and listening to you and I know why when you say listening or I say listening to you, you hear the same thing I hear.
Right.
But most people hear, when they hear listening, what they relate it to as is hearing.
Right.
They're not careful. There's no integrity in the listening. There's no tending to what's in the listening. That whole world of what's in your listening is a world.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and we should riff on that for a bit, because, if you're walking someone home and you're the person, you and I are together in this endeavor, and people in this community are together in this endeavor, the degree to which there's integrity to the listening is the degree to which anything as magical as possible. The other side of it is the degree to which there's no integrity in the listening, nothing's possible. And I don't think people have any idea what I'm saying when I say integrity in the listening. I don't think that's I know I've been, I'm steeped in that. So but integrity in the listening is, just to define it or to give it edges, is, how you listen and you're like, yeah, right.
As in like, whatever. Yeah, right.
Yeah, whatever. You said that, like, I don't know. My wife says she'll be ready in 10 minutes. And I'm like, yeah, right. Right. As zero chance I'm getting off the couch till I see her walk toward the door. I'm not, there's just no integrity in my listening, because 28 years of, that in the space. I don't want to throw my wife under the bus like that, but my saying, whatever, my saying, it's the same for me, like saying, yes, I'll get to the lawn.
Okay, there you go. Right.
Same phenomena, right? I throw myself under that same bus. But there's no integrity in the listening, because I've trashed the listening, or she's trashed the listening and never tended to it. Never been like, okay, I'm going to complete that. I'm not going to do that again. Like in the listening, in your listening, you hear them say, yeah, right. You hear them say what they say and you say, yeah, right. But you don't say to them, I'm not listening to that with integrity.
Right.
Right.
You say, yeah, right.
Yeah. It's, go back to, my wife for a second is, if we got a plane to catch.
Yeah.
I do in fact say, okay, you just said 10 minutes. Let's make sure we're on the same
10 minutes
page here, right? We're not talking dog ear 10 minutes. We're talking actual human 10 minutes, like whatever. So there, I bring integrity to the listening. So when someone says what home is, or they say their essence and their tipping point, and they've created this future, if there's integrity in the listening, then you're listening with authenticity, with honor, you're actually listening to their promise as if to what they said. It's not even a promise yet, but what they said, what matters to them, as if it was in fact something that was a promise, that it was something that was going to get fulfilled. You were going to listen to it with a wholeness and a completeness. And there was nothing in your listening other than they are going to win that. And if something else shows up, you say something about it and you get it complete, because the community aspect of what we're doing here requires everybody listen. The advantage of community is that someone else can listen it with integrity. It's not just you. And then they can see if this is the intersection. This is that intersection between possibility, listening, and accountability. Is it, if it's a real future, if it's something that really matters to you, if it really is your essence, if it is something that, and I'm really listening with integrity, then there's this opportunity for me to be a clearing in which you can hold yourself to account for fulfilling on that. We're talking about ass kicking, but there's an element to it. Like, I'm going to hold you to account has all these connotations. Like, I'm going to make you do something that maybe you don't want to do.
Right.
it's got a whole world in it, versus holding someone to account in this context is, you said this mattered.
Yeah.
Right. What got in your way? How'd that go? Like the walking of the home is, listen, your shoes are untied.
Yeah.
Right. Or did you eat? Because we can't walk home if if you're hungry. Like there's an accountability there.
Yeah.
In the speaking. I don't know. I just think that intersection is something worth exploring.
Yeah. I think there's I get that. I think there's also some space for new language, a new distinction around some of what that is, because there's so much resistance to the connotation of holding to account. Like, first of all, don't hold me to anything. Second of all, accounting for something. I mean, the weird thing about accounting is a very precise thing, and accounting to an essence of something that I don't fully know yet, that isn't fully baked yet, is sort of hard to do. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't diminish the heart behind tough love, or challenging a perspective, or holding one another up to a higher standard. Like what we did this like a couple months ago. We recorded something about maybe something that Jeff said, but it's like the game, like calling them up, I think is what you said. I'm calling you up. Do you remember that at all? Is that something?
I don't, but I like it as opposed to calling someone out.
Yeah, there's like a calling up, like, hey, you're getting from the minor leagues, you're getting called up to the major leagues.
That's great. No, I'm taking that note too, calling up versus calling out.
Because it's an honoring of someone's fullness, it's like hey, I see you. I mean, that's part of the integrity of the listening, I think, is I see you. You keep playing small, or actually, let's go back to our, you and me talking about, like, are we just shooting a shit, or are we doing something? And I think the difference maker in that, the thing that tips it over from shooting a shit to actually doing something, is the integrity in the listening. Like, I see you, Aaron, as this amazing space holder and creator for transformation and human potential. And you hear me however you hear me. And in that, it becomes more than shooting the shit, because there's a calling up to the work. There's a calling up to the thing we said we're going to invent. We're inventing something.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. I'm really glad you remembered that, because I completely forgot that. And that calling up versus calling out is really sort of the world there. If that intersection is done well, right, then it really is a calling up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Of what it is. Mm-hmm. I was, the blog post is really the audience for the blog that I started, that I had this conversation on, is team leaders, right? That's and in developing your team and developing the people on your team. And, when you're talking about production on a team, you are talking about selling 6 more houses, because that's the appropriate arena for that to be happening in. Yeah. And even there, there's the top down, I kept my old manager, Kevin Harmon. Do you remember Kevin?
No.
Okay, fine. One of my old managers, brilliant man. Anyway, he used to have this metaphor of like being the chain gang boss of, walking up and down the ditch, making sure everyone dug the ditches, right? And he's like, don't turn me into your chain gang boss. Don't make me like, are you digging? That's a ridiculous conversation for an adult to have with an adult. That's a demeaning conversation, demeans everyone involved, right? If I have to make sure you're digging the ditch, we are not, you can't.
That's good. Yeah.
I'm not going to talk. That's not an acceptable conversation. And I have that's the calling out.
Yeah.
Right.
Dig the ditch.
Right?
That's calling out. Yeah.
Yeah. Dig the ditch.
Are you digging the ditch? Yeah.
Right. Versus the calling up, right? Like, okay, where, you said this would happen. You said this would be your, the place where you'd be accountable for something happening that hasn't happened yet. You said that was your future.
Yeah.
Tell me about the fulfillment of your future. Now I'm calling you up. Right. And in the context of the team, right, even selling 6 more houses cannot be about selling 6 more houses, because that's digging a ditch. It's got to be about, good, you were going to get your family on vacation for a month in Mexico. And that's the only thing I care about, is that you have the kind, or you're going to fully fund your kids' IRA this year.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Or whatever it is for you, but like that.
Right.
So
There's such a skill here, or maybe even before the skill, there's a context. I think if you don't have the context right, then how you, the one calling someone up, show up can be arrogant, someone on a pedestal who has a plank in their eye while you're taking the speck out of someone else's. Like, there's a whole world that is like posturing, puffing, me trying to, there's a whole thing that just disintegrates the trust and the communication in a relationship when someone thinks they're all that, and I'm doing the duty of calling you up. And I think the ethos of walking each other home is that I don't have this figured out.
Right.
And you don't have this figured out.
That's right.
And the calling up is not a I know and you don't.
That's right.
The calling up is a supporting one another from an equality and equal space of let's figure our shit out.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, there's certainly context where that's certainly in, in any infinite game, I think that's the appropriate context. We don't know. Right. Yeah. And I think that ethos, though, of walking people home in terms of effective team management, I do know regarding young agents, I do know what's, the activity. But so I don't think that knowing and versus not knowing is the defining characteristic of this context. I think the context are we looking shoulder to shoulder with somebody, looking out at what they see, when they look out at the fulfillment of their essence, and or fulfillment of whatever it is they're up to, and are we looking with them?
Yeah.
And then are we holding them as big enough to fulfill it? Are we holding them? Are we listening them?
Yeah.
As that's a done deal. That's where you're going to do that. In my listening, you cannot, I can't, in my listening, and Chris, you talked about how you listen me. And for me, you really are, this unbelievably brilliant, thoughtful, grounded, sort of loving space of intellectual effort for me, like someone that's, in my listening, that's what brings me to these calls with you, is like, oh, I'm going to get challenged in all the ways that I wouldn't challenge myself, and have it be completely fun and really sort of delightful. So I think if we can train people or open up the space, I don't know, train, but open up the space for people to practice.
Yeah.
Cultivating their listening of people. That's sort of a end result of this community, or a function that this community provides, is a integrous listening for what we're up to. Right.
Yeah. I mean, God, I have like 3 things that want to come out. An example that's there for me is I had planned to do an event in February, a virtual appreciation event for my sphere of influence that I know. And most of those people are virtual. So it would be a Zoom thing. I've never done this before. It's I can't quite wrap my head around it. It feels like a jacket that's too tight or too loose, or it's just something about it is like, I can do a workshop, I can do a training, but a virtual appreciation event, I just feels, I can't find my place in it. Mm-hmm. And I had I've got a list, I've already started, but I'm pushing pause on that because I can't find myself in it. And all the while that I've pushed pause on that, there are other things I am finding momentum in. I'm like, this feels right. This feels right. This feels right. And none of that is in the plan of things, essence, tipping point, map, and plan. In the plan of things, there was a plan for an event in February, and I'm calling an audible and saying, that's not going to happen right now. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do something else. And the part that feels prickly to me about the holding to account thing would be if somebody were to say, if someone were to miss the fact that to not see that I am digging my ditch and showing up to my work every day and be misoccupied by the fact that I'm not doing an event in February. They'd be like, well, Chris, you said you were going to do an event in February. And I'm listening to you like the one who said they were going to do an event in February. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not playing that game.
Right. This
is me feeling my way through my important work. And you don't get to say what that is. I'm saying what that is. And this is what I don't like about the culture of accountability is it gets focused on the wrong thing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's right. It starts being focused on, but you said, see there, that's where those three things need to intersect.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It's got to be a combination for it to be empowering. It's got to be the possibility. You got to be listening for the fulfillment of the possibility.
Yeah.
And you got to have that integrity of that listening of who you are about it, which means you're not going to slip into getting them to do something like that integrity of listening goes both ways. And then there's, all right, Chris, well, I mean, if we were just talking about that event, right, then it wouldn't, you could actually say after you just said what you said about the jacket and everything else. And if I was listening to you, right, had that been a project inside this community, that would be, okay, well, that probably doesn't have integrity right now for you to do that event because it's not an authentic expression yet of who you are. So why don't we circle back on that in 2 months after you had some time to wrestle with it? But at the same time, there would be listen, unless you're going to declare I'm not doing that ever.
Yeah.
When do you want to circle? When would it empower you for me to circle back with you on the fulfillment of that? Like, again, I would probably ask something like, what was the intention you were out to fulfill when you thought that event would, what was the intention that event was supposed to fulfill?
Right.
Right. But that would be me listening with integrity. So it didn't become, because there's a million reasons not to have that event.
This is why it's first the context and then the skill. Like you're highly skilled at that conversation.
Right.
You have so many repetitions in that style of checking in. Well, I'm not using the word accountability. So many repetitions in that kind of checking in with people about what they intend and desire and want to create. And one of the things that's coming up for me is I think for most people, out of those three, possibility, listening, and accountability, those were the three, right? Possibility, listening, accountability.
Yep.
That accountability is the easiest. Like it's the laziest choice. Because to listen for the possibility and to listen for the person would require tons of curiosity, time, and patience to hang in it versus just be like, well, you said and you didn't. So,
well, it's also that of the three, right? Possibility has virtually no meaning to anybody outside this conversation, right? So possibility doesn't occur. Possibility occurs to people like probability. So they see possibility and I have no idea what that means. So I'm not going to think about that. Then there's listening and people already think they listen.
Right.
That's like, I don't need to work on that. I heard you just fine. That's that you and I both know that is people's default relationship to listening is I'm good. And then there's accountability. And I know what that means. That means to get you to do what you said you would do. So there's no thinking involved in that. Where those things intersect because no one gives a shit. They already think they know. So we really are talking about, I thought you said it really well, like new language around it. And I know you have it'd be useful for you to come up with a different word than accountability because you've got so much laden with it. I'm out to use accountability just because I don't have, I got nothing against using a different word, but you should know when I'm using accountability, it's like integrity. When I use integrity, most people hear morality,
right,
good, bad, right, wrong. And I don't mean good, bad, right. I'm not saying that integrity's wholeness and completeness. Integrity is like, but you and I have had thousands and thousands and thousands of repetitions in distinguishing that as that. And I'm out to create this world around accountability as a whole different distinction than what you we're born into about it. So if we come up with another word, I'm good. And if we don't, then we'll just have to keep.
We'll just have to have a 5 to 20 minute conversation to set the stage for the use of it every time.
I mean, you got to do that with integrity.
Yeah.
And you're certainly going to have to do it with possibility and listening.
Yeah, right.
People have really jack all about what the hell that means.
Well, so that's such a great segue to back to community, because I think one of the things that happens then in community is once those the agreements about words, like that you and I understand integrity or listening, and we don't need to revisit that once it's agreed upon. Like once we sort of are on the same page about it, we can have conversations much faster than not. And that's the benefit of community, is once you're in community and the community grows around a set of distinctions or grows around a common thought process, the support is faster. The support is richer. The momentum is bigger. Why? Because we can get there faster.
Yeah.
With our words, talking to each other, we can get to something that resembles a plan or action or anything faster, and do it in a way that doesn't feel like I have to bristle or posture every time you come at me, because I already know that this is not an ego play. Outside of the community, it might feel that way. So I don't know where you're coming from. Inside the community, I'm already clear.
Really well said. That thing about aligning on definitions is, the first thing, this is funny because there's an already aligned on definition for accountability that's in the background. Yeah. That if we don't dismantle, we can't use it because it's an aligned on agreed definition of accountability, which is I'm going to get you to do what you said you would do. God damn it. Something like that. Yeah. And, and you got to take the time. Listening doesn't occur to people like it's a malleable, active kind of phenomenon. The agreed upon world of listening is way closer to, it means the same thing as hearing. Right. So unless you bring, and like you said, you bring distinction to it. Yeah. But once you do, you can ask for, 10 cc's of something stat, and it means something to the nurse, but you don't ask for 10 cc's of espresso statted.
That's good. It reminds me of a playbook. You said that, it was great because it's similar to a team having, the Seattle Seahawks having their own plays they call from the line of scrimmage. Like, the other team doesn't know what that means, but that team knows what it means, and it allows them to pull off movement on a field that is choreographed to produce a result. And I think, a team is Seahawks are a community of football players that practice together and have agreed upon definitions of words and plays. And and even beyond what is produced on the field, there's an ethos to the team and an essence of what the team stands for with Pete Carroll. And if he's still the coach, is he still the coach? I'm just embarrassing myself.
Yes, you are.
To you as a total Seahawks fan, but
yes, you are. Yes, he is.
I know enough to be culturally relevant, but not enough to be.
But at least to know what you don't know, which is excellent.
Yeah. And so there's I see that in every community. There is that type of an ability to call a play, and for all of us to produce a result because we're dancing together. We're doing it that way together, not because I called you out or I called a play. And there's just a beautiful synergy that happens when we share language and we share distinctions and all that. Yeah, what do you call possibility, listening, and accountability? What are those three? Do you have what the trifecta of something? Like, what is that? What are those three things to you?
I was just talking about how for someone to be an effective team leader, it would pay to get interested in where those three things intersect. I don't have a name for that center part for the intersection, because that's what I'm interested in, is where those three things intersect.
That'd be cool to distinguish that, because I think those are really, those feel like really important ingredients, and you could come up with different words for a word for accountability, or not. But those, I really like how those three things play together. That's really interesting to me. Yeah. Like one without the other two feels incomplete now that I look at it.
Right. I think the three, and it's a, you know, I don't know. There's a, you know, that's where the magic happens. There's a funny New Yorker cartoon, an old New Yorker cartoon of two scientists sitting in front of a blackboard, and it's filled with, you know, a quantum equation, you know, it's huge, massive equation. And then at the end, there's a little asterisk and it says, and then a miracle happens. And it's like this whole thing, but it's really about this little, that I can't explain. This last little part is a miracle.
Right.
And it sort of feels like that. Like that's where miraculous results live, is inside the intersection of those three things. And I just, you're going to laugh, but you know, so I get most of the blog post outlines that I've been doing done through AI. And, but I can't, I was doing this one and I was like, okay, there's nothing here. There's nothing in the AI that's going to fill this in, you know, because every definition they have of listening and every definition they have accountability and every definition they have possibility doesn't mean anything like I want to do it. So there's, you know, I had to write that blog post all on my own. And, I just thought it was really funny. It was like, yeah, I mean, people are worried about AI, this and that. And I got friends that are just, you know, nuts about it, but it's never coming up with unique.
Yeah.
I don't know about never's, you know, we're never going to the moon. So,
Asterisk.
but it doesn't right now come up with unique break, you know, unthought thoughts.
It doesn't postulate. It doesn't
postulate. It doesn't propose. It doesn't theorize anything, right? It's super useful at what it's useful for. I mean, it's unbelievably useful at what it's useful for. Like fucking great.
Yeah.
But I was noticing the distinct limitation of it when I wanted to write that blog post. I was like, damn it, I got to actually think here.
Wow. I love that though. Wow, that's really interesting. We should do an episode on that because
what, the three?
On AI and postulating, and I feel like I'll plant the seed here, but it was too much to go into in this episode. But just as a seed planting, it's like AI in some, how I'm thinking of it right now, AI has allowed our ceiling to become our floor. Like the thing we've all been trying to prove our value in is now taken care of by some technology, which you could relate to that as a threat. Oh my God, my place in the world is being replaced by AI. Or you could say, I now have the space and freedom to postulate something new. What we've been stuck on is a hamster wheel of the same. Yeah. And what's opening up is, in the age of Aquarius, thank you very much, back to the woo-woo woods, is an opportunity for what is new. And I think if what we do as communities and as people on this path of consciousness is begin to peer into what's next and use language to define a new world, then we have a whole new exciting infinite game to play. But if what you're lamenting about is the finite game you've been replaced in, well, then, yeah, that's a shitty existence.
That's right. I mean, it's so funny, Chris, that you say it that way, because I think it's so, you know, I love using the AI. I use, you know, a program called Jasper, and it's, you know, it outlines, it does all the sort of menial lifting that would take all my freaking time. And now I actually am freed up to do actual thinking, you know, I mean, like you said, if we're, you know, I think it's going to make it super obvious what you're no longer needed for and allow you to go do and that if that's all you were doing in the past, then you weren't adding any value anyway, because it really wasn't. It's regurgitating something that was already there. It's going to make the regurgitation super freaking obvious, you know, and then new thought will have to be new thought.
Right. Yes. And that's the age we're in, I think. Well, I love these conversations. And this is the benefit of community. Like when you are engaged in a conversation, again, I'll use Jeff Wilmore, but the working out of how you think about it, what you understand about it. There's a working out of that. You don't just wake up and be like, oh, I see it all. There's a working out of it. And when you do that with people who are in a similar proximity to the way you see the world, you can now compare notes and have sounding boards and iron sharpen iron to the other side of some understanding, you know?
Right. And I love that. And I hadn't even thought of naming that center part until you said it. I'm like, oh, should come up with something there. Let's think about that.
Yeah, you should distinguish that. I'm calling you up, Aaron.
There you
should
go.
distinguish that. I stand for what you.
I think that's the magic part.
Oh my God.
That's where the good shit happens.
Yeah.
I'm calling that the good shit.
The good shit. It's the Venn diagram of the good shit.
It's the Venn diagram of the good shit in management. Yeah. That's the working title.
Take that, Peter Drucker.
That's right.
Peter Drucker's got nothing on that Venn diagram.
No.
I love it. Well, if you guys listening to this want to learn more about this community Aaron and I keep talking about, we now have another application in, which I'm pumped about.
Woohoo!
It means that we're not, first of all, 4. I mean, what do they say? 1, coincidence. 2, good luck. 3 as a pattern or trend. 4, I mean, I don't know. That might be a proven concept.
We could be, we're ready to explode into, like, maybe we get into 6 right away. We'll see.
I mean, maybe, but so here's the thing. If you're an agent who feels this pulling to something bigger than the realm of GCI and transactions, then that's what this conversation, that's what this community is incubating, is the essence of your impact and your purpose in the world. And what's the agenda? Well, I mean, that's to be determined, isn't it? Because we're sort of walking each other home in that.
It's whatever your agenda is. I mean, we've got, right. I mean, it's whatever you would need. We don't know. We'd be standing shoulder to shoulder with you around that.
It's those 3 things. It's that Venn diagram. It's possible. What can you expect? What's the promise? Possibility, listening, and accountability. Like that there is a space held for all of that to come to life. And you can learn more about that at repurpose.group/invite. Repurpose.group/invite. Aaron, as always, super sweet. Awesome. Thank you. And we'll see you next time.